When Islam reached West Africa in the 8th century, Muslim historians began to write about West Africa as it spread throughout the area. Documents about the history of this region show Arab historians knew it as the Balad al-Sudan, the land of the blacks. The empires of Ghana, Mali, Songhai, Timbuktu, and Gao became the first sub-Saharan people to accept Islam, early as 850 AD. Commercial centers provided the first places of worship as traders began to have prayer areas in the towns. These centers of trade invariably became symbols of African civilization, showcasing an Islamic learning dynasty. The community was governed under the Islamic Sharia system, and scholars began gathering to share vast resources of knowledge. Al-Bakri, the Muslim geographer, provides an early account of ancient Ghana in his book, Roads and Kingdoms. He describes Ghana of 1068 as highly advanced. Al-Bakri writes, economically, it was a prosperous country. The king had employed Muslim interpreters, and most of his ministers and treasurers were also Muslims. The Muslim ministers were learned enough to record events in Arabic and corresponded on behalf of the king with other rulers. He gives the following picture of Islam in Ghana during that time. The city of Ghana consists of 2 towns lying on a plain, one of which is inhabited by Muslims and is large, possessing 12 mosques, one of which is a congregational mosque for Friday prayers. West African griots tell the story of a woman named Buktu who settled near the banks of the Niger early in the 11th century. She maintained a water well which became a social center and stopping place for caravans of travelers. A village was formed which was later named Timbuktu. A supreme judge named Sheikh Sidi Abu al-Barakat Mahmud, who had visited Mecca and Cairo, ordered that a mosque be built. With the financial backing of a wealthy Mandekan woman, they designed a mosque featuring an inner court with the exact dimensions of the Kaaba in Mecca. It would become a leading center of education. Timbuktu had long been a destination or stop for merchants from the Middle East and North Africa. It wasn't long before ideas as well as merchandise began passing through the fabled city. Since most, if not all, these traders were Muslim, the mosque would see visitors constantly. The temple accumulated a wealth of books from throughout the Muslim world, becoming not only a center of worship, but a center of learning. Books became more valuable than any other commodity in the city, and private libraries sprouted up in the homes of local scholars. In addition to books, Timbuktu accumulated navigational maps and logs from geographers throughout the world. During the 10th century, stories began to surface of sailors reaching a distant land. One of the first accounts came from a 10th century historian named Ali al-Masudi. An accomplished geographer, philosopher, and natural scientist, he wrote a book called In the Meadows of Gold and Quarries of Jewels. In it, he tells the story of a young man from Spain named Kashkash ibn Said, who crossed the Atlantic Ocean, made contact with people on the other side, and returned in the year 889 AD. Al-Masudi wrote, Cash gathered a group of young men and went on a voyage on this ocean. He returned with a fabulous booty. Every Spaniard knew his story. By the 12th century, the world's best-known geographer, Muhammad al-Idrisi, was also telling stories of sailors crossing the Atlantic. Al-Idrisi had created the most accurate map of the world in pre-modern time. His book, The Delight of Him Who Desires to Journey Through the Climates, is a geographical encyclopedia containing detailed maps and information on European countries, Africa, and Asia. The Book of Roger, which was drawn by al-Idrisi in 1154 for King Roger II of Sicily, contained legends written in Arabic and was copied by geographers for 3 centuries without alteration. In his book, al-Idrisi told stories of a Moorish ship which had crossed the Atlantic around 800 AD. He added validity to the reports recorded by other Muslim historians and geographers concerning Muslim seamen and navigators crossing the Atlantic Ocean. He also wrote about Portuguese seamen who crossed the Great Sea. A group of sailors traveled into the Sea of Darkness from Lisbon in order to discover what was in it and to what extent were its limits. They finally reached an island that had people who spoke Arabic. This astonishing historical report not only describes contact between Muslim seamen and the native people of the Americas, but suggests a strong familiarity between the two. By the 14th century, West Africa had seen the rise of the Mali Empire, one of the largest in the world during that time. The king of Mali was Mansa Abu Bakari, who was the nephew of the empire's founder, Sundiata Keita. As a young man, Abu Bakari heard stories of a land across the Atlantic and dreamed of sailing off into the massive ocean. While studying at Sankore University, Abu Bakari encountered maps from Muslim geographers such as al-Masudi and al-Idrisi, who had concluded that the Atlantic Ocean was not the western edge of the world. He learned about ocean currents, studied navigational charts, and also heard amazing tales of Sudanese people who had ventured across the Atlantic some 2,000 years earlier. Abu Bakari had been assured by learned professors and Arab geographers that new lands lay on the other side of the Great Green Ocean. Sometime around 1304, Abu Bakari assembled a fleet of ships and sent them west across the Atlantic in search of the new land. Accounts of the expedition are documented in a book by 14th century Arab historian Al-Umari. According to his writings, Mansa Abu Bakari launched 200 ships filled with men and a further 200 ships amply stocked with food, gold, and water to last for 2 years. African griots, who are known as the oral historians of African civilization, tell the story of one of those ships returning and informing Abu Bakari of their journey. The captain told him of their success in reaching a beautiful new land. Upon the news, the African ruler would gather a fleet of 2,000 ships, which he would lead himself. Ready were his best sailors, farmers, and carpenters, and in the year 1311 he would hand over the government and the title of Mansa to his brother Kankan Musa and fulfill his lifelong dream to sail across the Atlantic.
people from what was then the Mali Empire took off. It's almost certain they took off. The big debate is whether they arrived in the Americas. You see. So there's a considerable agreement that they took off in order to cross the Atlantic. And then there are elements of sculpture, as you know, in Mexico, which has so-called Negroid features. And we know the sculpture goes back 2,000 years. So obviously that sculpture must have had models long before Christopher Columbus crossed the ocean blue.
Mansa Kankan Musa was the grandson of Sundiata Keita. After assuming the throne from his brother, he led Mali to become the largest and richest realm of Africa. Unlike Abu Bakari, Musa was interested in extending the borders of the empire to the east toward Cairo. He captured the neighboring kingdom of Songhai and its major city, Timbuktu. Mali already had firm control of the trade routes to the southern lands of gold and the northern lands of salt. Musa brought a large part of the western Sudan within a single system of law and order. This was a big political success and made Mansa Musa one of the greatest statesmen in the history of Africa.